Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining today's session. I'm just going to give it about 30 seconds or so as I see people joining today's presentation, and we'll get started and keep this on time for you today. So let's just give it a few more seconds and we'll get started. And I see people coming in as we speak, so that's great. And just as we're waiting for everyone to join, this is a webinar format, so if you have questions, we would love to answer those. We've got a great speaker today with a lot of experience. So if you have questions, please put them into the Q&A panel or the chat, whichever one you find first is fine. We'll keep an eye on both. So the Q&A should be on your Zoom toolbar, and you can enter questions there. So let's get started. I see people still coming in, but we are recording this session. We will share that with everyone. So welcome and thank you for joining. We appreciate your time. My name is Craig McInnes, co-CEO at myCaribou. And as I mentioned just a moment ago, please feel free to ask questions. We're going to leave lots of time for Q&A and take advantage of our great speaker today with his experience and answer questions that you might have. So my name, as I said, is Craig McInnes. I'm co-CEO and co-founder of myCaribou. I'll be moderating today's session. Just to give you a little bit of background on us, myCaribou is a global software platform that's transforming the way medtech manufacturers and distributors find and manage partners globally. With myCaribou, manufacturers and distributors can discover new markets. We have over 80,000 data points on over 100 countries. You can connect with over 43,000 manufacturers and distributors from over 150 countries to build new partnerships. And you can manage your partnerships through improved communication and performance monitoring. Scott is going to be talking a lot about successful partnerships and the hurdles and things to avoid and so on. And we'll show you towards the end how myCaribou can actually help with that as well. Angela is posting a link to sign up for free for myCaribou. If you haven't already, please feel free to sign up. It's a 30-day free trial, after which you can either subscribe to the platform or you can stay as what's called a listing subscriber, which is limited use at no cost. So it's entirely up to you at the end of that time. All right, let's get started. So let me introduce you to Scott Newton. I have the pleasure of having being able to tap into Scott's brain on a regular basis, and I'm excited to have Scott here today. He has over 4 decades of success in international medical device markets with Hillrom, DeRoyal, CR Bard, and Cardinal Health. He's built successful medtech channels around the globe from both the distributor and a manufacturer's perspective. Scott has managed partner relationships in Europe, South America, North America, and the Asia-Pac regions. He established a global distribution infrastructure through 18 countries for an Australian-based manufacturer of safe patient handling equipment. And while with Cardinal Health Canada, managed a team responsible for over 400 manufacturer relationships. So put it this way, with over 40 years in the medtech industry, Scott's the perfect person to help us avoid the management pitfalls of medtech partnerships. And on that note, I'm going to pass it over to Scott. He's going to go through the presentation today. We will do a short demo, and then we'll have Q&A. And just to remind everyone, if you have questions, put them in as we go. That helps me as a moderator to read the questions and get them ready for Scott as we get to the Q&A session towards the end. So Scott, over to you.
Well, thank you, Craig. Thanks for the introduction. I don't know about being perfect, but I know I'm speaking to a global audience, and there's a lot of experience out there in managing partnerships. But it is an honor to be speaking with you today, and certainly a privilege to be part of the myCaribou journey as we focus on how the medtech industry manages global expansion. Throughout this journey for the last couple of years, we validated that traditional practices, to engage channel partners are producing less and less ideal outcomes. Interestingly, that virtually everyone we've talked to will validate that about a third of their relationships at any given time are driving the bulk of their business and are very productive. A third need work; they're going one way or the other, and a third are just need to be cut loose and let go. So today, from my office here in Toronto, Canada, I'm happy to welcome you to review with me some of the, first of all, some of the reasons why these partnerships are proving to be so difficult. We're going to discuss some of the pitfalls to avoid, and hopefully we'll uncover some better ways to move forward in the future. So let's see if I got this working. Great. So why is this so difficult? Expectations over the course of speaking over the last few years, speaking with hundreds of companies, and to learn about the pain points that they've encountered. Expectations are either unclear or unrealistic in many cases. And manufacturers often don't research their markets. Instead of, they may be making broad assumptions based on just population, not realizing that really no two markets are the same. So in order to identify whether you're in the right market is so critical, and taking the time to gather that information is going to pay off. But why is it so difficult? Because often that is skipped over more than you'd realize. Do you have the resources required? Are you realistic about what it's going to cost you to enter a market, and who's going to pay for the required resources? This is often an afterthought. Cultural illiteracy is an issue. The cultural differences are often not considered when developing and maintaining trusting partner relationships. Look, I worked in Australia. I'm a Canadian. I worked in Australia for many years managing a company there. And there are significant cultural differences that really do impact your business if you're not aware of what those differences are. I won't get into too many specifics on that, but there's definitely a different culture there, a different work culture as well, that you have to, a good marketplace, but some things you have to factor in when establishing your expectations for that marketplace. Business review and planning need to be comprehensive and effective. And rarely are they. There needs to be a high level of accountability. And we'll talk about some of those pitfalls in a few minutes and what can be done about it. Finally, people are busy, and we have many new communication tools, just like the Zoom we're using today, but many are not used or misused. What will be the most effective for your business? So those are really the reasons why this can be so difficult. I'll just share a story with you as I lead into the next phase here and looking at those pitfalls about having a process. I worked for a great company and a great leader in the company, and we all know about Medtech and Arab Health and Hospitalar, the various conferences. So a senior executive from my organization met with somebody at Medtech and contacted me afterwards, and they were very upfront and said, you don't have to do anything, but I think I met somebody who may solve all of your channel your channel challenges. And I was managing a direct sales team. Anyway, before I blew up my infrastructure, I obviously did some due diligence on this, only to find that this partner wasn't even in the acute care space, barely in the acute care space, somewhat had a presence in the long-term care space. But without a process, things like that happen, and you could end up going down the wrong path. So make sure you have a process. This is a major pitfall for manufacturers, are distributors who are not what they say they are. And I really want to stress the importance of call point synergies versus product synergies. This is something really near and dear to me, where, you can have a cardiovascular distributor that's really strong with cardiac surgeons and anesthetists in the cardiac OR. If you need your cardiovascular product sold into the cath lab and they're not in the cath lab, man, it's a lot easier to train on products than it ever is on training a sales force to call on new call points. So don't make assumptions or don't overlook the importance of call point synergies with your distributor. That's far more important. You can train someone on a product. So do your due diligence on your distributors. Get references, understand their reputation, understand their call points and their coverage. Don't be fooled. That's a major pitfall. Finally, at myCaribou, we have opportunity posting, which may open up new option considerations that would never come your way otherwise. It's easy to fall into that trap of meeting somebody. Everybody's got good intentions, but expand your search, put some filters on it, and have that filter down into looking at maybe there's 2 or 3 better options out there that you would need to consider. So find the right partner. So second is a sales model. Pitfall is not having the right model that you need to succeed in your business. Is there enough feet on the ground? Feet on the ground is so critical for success. Do you need a dedicated effort? Do you need logistics? But make sure you understand the model. I'll share with you that I launched a safe patient handling product into the UK 10 years ago. And the distributor there and I worked closely to ensure that we had a great launch. And they dedicated a resource. We trained their whole sales force, but they dedicated a specialist to support us there. So if you don't have the right model or considerations for the right model, you could run into a lot of trouble. I also launched a product, a capital product into the Canadian market a few years ago. And the company had a traditional kind of distributor model, manufacturer-distributor relationship. And I had them consider more of a logistics supplier to cover the broad 6 time zones of Canada and supported by sales agents. Now, you take a look at that model, very different than they'd had implemented elsewhere, but they loved it. And as long as the margin was there and there was margin control, it's a model that can work quite successfully and something to consider. So the pitfall is don't try to, what's working in one country, in one market with population densities and competition and whatnot may not be right for another market. So consider what those other sales model options could be. And that company that I worked with at that time actually has implemented that model in other markets that they have found to be successful. So we'll call that sort of a hybrid model. Contracts are also extremely important. They need to be used. They can be misused if not handled properly. And the pitfall is that your standard contract may not address the specific requirements of your business or the success requirements that you need. Avoid non-exclusive contracts that don't protect you. I've seen where contracts need to be the exclusivity needs to be mutual. And you don't want a situation where you're exclusive to a distributor, but they're not exclusive to you and maybe actually bidding against your product on a tender in that country. And I've seen that happen. So contracts need to be taken very seriously from the start, and they need to be used. I've seen where inventory requirements and contracts, where you're committing to a certain amount of inventory, be careful of that. I worked with a distributor in Canada here that was getting every 3 months, certainly at the end of a year, had heavy pressure to buy inventory that they didn't necessarily think that they could sell. And that particular distributor ended up with inventory on their shelf. I had to write off inventory that had expiry dates on it, because contractually that distributor kind of forced them to pre-stock inventory to keep probably shareholders happy. So be careful of your inventory commitments. Ideally, what you want is to be able to, manage to have a mutual agreement with your manufacturer so that nobody gets stuck with inventory. And expectations and KPIs are going to be a theme to anything that you do. And that is ensuring from the front end contractually that you have, established those expectations and strong KPIs. So a pitfall to avoid with KPIs is don't manage or agree to KPIs with the business manager or the marketing manager you're working with without ensuring that you got buy-in from the department, which is usually sales, that are required to execute it. And too many times I've seen where sales go, we never committed to that. So beware of that. That's a major pitfall. And also just add that when you're managing the contract, that's the time when you've got their attention. And you're that new supplier. All intentions are good. You have their attention. But remember, you're only that new supplier for a short period of time. Down the road, there's going to be somebody else they're working with. And you may need that contract to pull out and say, hey, remember what we committed to. Share a wallet. The percentage of time, that selling time that you're getting from your distributor, if you're a manufacturer, that share a wallet is so critical. We all want feet on the ground. We all want the best relationship we possibly could have with a distributor that loves your product and gives a high percentage of time to it. But it can be a trap because your partner may not be who they say they are. It's your partner is really committed to applying the resources required to succeed with your product, then you're all right. But the trap is that they may be great on logistics, but light on outbound selling. So kind of hard to get that share a wallet after the fact, and brings it back to the importance of establishing good expectations on the front end. I worked with a global manufacturer out of Europe and a national distributor one time. And I'll tell you, the expectations were high, the investment was massive, and the commitment turned out to be much lower than expected. And we only had about 30% compliance. It's kind of hard to recover from that. A pitfall is you may not really understand who your partner is. And again, you're only the flavor of the month for a while. Margins drive behavior. So the pitfall to avoid is learning that after the fact, your partner has margin expectations or requirements that end up pricing you out of the market. Your business model absolutely needs to be aligned with margins. So avoid, that you can't, as if you're a manufacturer, you can't be dictating margins and whatnot. Well, I think you can, because everybody wants to succeed and everybody wants to understand the price points that you want to be positioned at in the marketplace. So here's one of the traps to avoid, and that is sub-distributors, especially in the US market, where many distribution companies utilize sub-distributors. So I ran into a situation once, launching a capital piece into the US, where the distributor presented themselves as a national distributor, but was very dependent on subs. So ended up that between the distributor and the subs, we were priced too high for the marketplace, and they were making the bulk of the profits. As the manufacturer's representative in this case, it was a pretty tough equation to digest in the end, and it failed. So beware of your model, the margins between your cost points and your selling point, and make sure there's enough margin in there to support your business model. Things will go a lot easier. KPIs, this can make or break your deal. And I mentioned already the importance of that, ensuring that KPIs, you have the buy-in from the person that's executing. So just reinforcing that. The pitfall is avoid, not establishing those KPIs on the front end, which is so critical. They need to be developed, they need to be implemented, and they need to be managed. So I would say that if these are written correctly, they will drive your launch, and they'll drive the performance right out of the gate, and then have that process for review, which we'll talk a bit about, business reviews. Sustainability, be mindful of celebration. So simply the pitfall would be celebrating too soon. Don't take your eye off the longer term growth objectives. I had a situation in California with a capital equipment piece where a huge order came in. It was fantastic. We all loved it, but it drove the behavior in the wrong direction because it really wasn't that realistic of the sort of the national expectations of success. So, and it came in real early, and it really took the project off the rails. It really did. So I put that in as a pitfall to avoid is really keep your eye on that long-term growth, manage through the peaks and valleys, manage expectations, which is a recurring theme here. And probably enough said on that. Communication, distributors are busy people. So the pitfall, like most things, is failing to establish solid, good communication practices. Whatever method you choose, establish this from the beginning and commit to a regular schedule. Here's what you want to avoid. You want to avoid where your meetings 6 months down the road with your partners is entirely focused on solving problems. What you want is meetings to be celebrating successes and talking about growth objectives and expectations. But without communication channels, you become reactive, and you end up using your time with your partners to problem solve as opposed to grow. And also on the front end, regarding these channels and the communication is as distributors especially are so busy, they're busy people, you're not going to be that new guy for long. You won't be the flavor of the month for long. So you got to think a year ahead, 2 years ahead, and say, what do I want that relationship to be like then, and establish those communication channels today. So the final, to round out the pitfalls to avoid here, I have, regarding business reviews, I'll share with you that I have sat through so many ineffective business reviews over the years. I would see where manufacturers, on the distribution side, where I spent some time, manufacturers would come from far and away to review the business, and they would have their song sheet, and us, the distributor, had our song sheet, all good, but they didn't really align. So we kind of ended up with a situation where it was almost like Groundhog Day, where you spent the first 30 minutes of every business review trying to agree on what you agreed you were going to do 3 months or 6 months before, as opposed to coming in and singing from that same song sheet, measuring your KPIs, your performance, having the right people together and in the room. Now, at myCaribou, there are tools for that. And it's certainly been identified as a for companies to have some kind of standardization on their business reviews, and to put that together and again create those song sheets lend themselves to much better participation and success in the long run. So in summary, identifying these pitfalls. By identifying these pitfalls to avoid, number one, this will improve the likeliness that you're in the right place. And by that, I mean, are you in the right market with a clear understanding of the business potential, the culture, the regulatory requirements, and is the timing right? Number two is avoiding these pitfalls should have improve the chances of you selecting the right partner. And whether you're a distributor looking for a reliable and validated supplier, or a manufacturer looking for a distributor that will get the job done with you with aligned expectations. And then the third is, this will drive better planning, more effective planning. All that goes into contracts and KPIs and communications and business reviews, just to name a few. So, all in all, managing expectations are so critical, and all of that will bring that together. So by ending, I'm going to leave you to think about some of your current partners, and also perhaps a new partner that you're in the process of considering right now. And, ask yourself where they're going to be in that a third equation that I referenced at the beginning. Where are they going to be in a year's time? And thinking about that equation and what you can do today, what changes or approach that you can implement today to accelerate your success. And with that, I'll throw it back to Craig, and I thank you for allowing me into your offices today and wherever you may be. And let's go from there, Craig.
Sorry, Scott, didn't mean to cut you off there. Thank you very much. Just as we're going to transition into some Q&A here momentarily, just a reminder, if you have questions, and I see some coming in now, you can put them in the Q&A panel or the chat, whichever your preference is, and we will get to those, as well as some questions that were asked in advance of the presentation today. We will be sending you a copy of the deck. We will send you a copy of the recording from the presentation. I'm just going to transition very quickly into showing you how myCaribou, and I'll do this in about 5 or 6 minutes total, how myCaribou can accomplish some of the things that Scott described today in terms of finding, connecting, managing partnerships in the platform. So I will do that, and I'll just ask as well as I'm doing that over the next 4 or 5 minutes, 6 minutes, continue to add questions. We have an opportunity here with Scott to pick his brain, so feel free to do so and ask as many questions as you like. If we don't get to all your questions today, we will follow up afterwards, which is something we do on all webinars. So I'm just going to take you for a quick overview here of the platform as it relates to what Scott talked about, as you're adding questions along the way. So very quickly, myCaribou, as I mentioned, global platform, really helps you accomplish 3 major things. One is to view and understand markets, explore markets before you go to them, which is something that Scott talked about today. The second is to find and connect with new partners. And the third is to collaborate with your existing partners. So I'll show you very, very quickly from a market discovery perspective. I happen to be a manufacturer in this case. This is my view of the world. These green markets are active. The purple markets are target markets. We have market data. I'll pick a market here that I haven't identified as either a target or an active market. And I'll just show you that we have over 800 data points on 100+ markets around the world. So if you want to think about going to Saudi Arabia, and we're going to talk about we have an upcoming session on Gulf countries. So this would be a good example of that. But we cover roughly 800 data points on each of these markets. So if you want to understand the regulatory environment of Saudi Arabia, you can do so. If you want to understand, acute care hospital beds, care facilities, nursing care facilities, counts of physicians, clinical specialists, et cetera, We get into all that. We get into utilization, diagnostic exams, surgeries by category. And we do that, as I said, on 105 countries around the world. So I chose Saudi Arabia as an example, but we do that all over the place. The second thing we do is help you find partners. So the platform itself will allow you to, let's assume you're a manufacturer in this case, and you're looking to find some distribution partners. So I would say, show me distributors and sales agents. And let's say I'm looking for some that are actually headquartered in Brazil. And that's going to take my 44,000 companies down to 1,100. So there's 1,100 distributors in Brazil on the platform. And let's say I'm a cardiovascular focused manufacturer. Maybe I make catheters to Scott's example earlier. And this will then take you down to 93 distributors. And I could go further. And I'd say maybe I'm looking for regional distributors. Maybe I'm looking for national, specialty versus full line. Perhaps I want to work with companies that have been around a little while, that have a certain size and scale to them. But in any case, when you're ready to connect, you can look at the company, view the profile, in this case of Valflux. You could go to their website, you can go to their LinkedIn page. But when you're ready to connect, you can connect through the platform. In this particular case, they ask 3 questions of anybody that's trying to reach out to them. Tell us a little bit about your company. I could fill that in, answer 2 or 3 questions, and it'll put a connection request in from me, a manufacturer, to Valflux, a distributor in Brazil. So this is going to help you find very quickly. And, you know, in the spirit of some of the stories that Scott told, I'll give you an example. I was at Medical Fair Asia recently and was speaking with a manufacturer in their booth. As I approached the booth, he was sitting on his laptop. We got chatting, and one of the things he mentioned to me is he was looking for distributors in Thailand. He was literally Google searching medical device distributors in Thailand, and I showed him very quickly that I could find 100 plus distributors, filter that down to what he was looking for, and allow him to reach out to them quickly. If you are a distributor on today's presentation, I should say, let's switch gears here and say you're looking for a manufacturer of cardiovascular products. And now you're going to see 1,300 manufacturers. And I'll sort that by country just so you can see the global representation of manufacturers on the platform, as you can see here, all over the world. I could actually filter that and say I'm looking for manufacturers from China, or maybe I'm looking for manufacturers not from China. And again, I can get much more specific as well. I had an example the other day of a distributor in the US looking for catheter suppliers. And so here is an example of that. That's 107 companies from a variety of countries around the world. Same idea, I could connect with them. The other way to find partners is something called opportunity posts. And the idea here is basically that you can post an opportunity. And for this, I'm actually going to switch over to the live platform. You can post an opportunity. So this is one that came in this morning as an example. American Diagnostics Corp. They are looking for, so they're a manufacturer of handheld diagnostic instruments, and they're looking for distributors in Hungary, Poland, Spain, and Portugal. And so this is a real posted opportunity in the platform. And what will happen is any distributor that fits that criteria, this will be a high match score for them. And that would actually be shown in match scoring on the right-hand side here. So if you were a distributor in Hungary, Spain, Portugal, Poland, in this case, it would be a high match score for you. And you could actually respond to their opportunity post. So there are all kinds of examples as to how you can do that. But what it's going to allow you to do is actually to, what Scott talked about earlier is, finding the right partner and having some early dialogue with that partner before you move forward is a critical part of this. So that's the second piece is after you discover markets and you start to find partners and start dialogue with those, the third thing I'll show you is really to the meat of today's presentation, which is managing those partners globally. So I'm just going to show you my view of the world currently. So I have a partner. In fact, I'll switch over to this view in my demo database here. Here we go. So in my view, I have partners in Argentina. I've got 2 in Brazil, 2 in Canada, 1 in Spain, 1 in the UK, 1 in the US, 1 in Uruguay. The way that you add partners is very simple. Now, keep in mind, and I'll just use Australia as an example here. I'm not necessarily inviting my partner in to work with me yet. I'll show you what that looks like. But let's say I'm working with Big Green Surgical, which is a client of ours in Australia as a distributor. I will add that to my partner's portfolio view, and I now have Australia, Big Green Surgical as identified as my partner in that market. Okay. Now I could invite them to join me and work with me in here as simply as putting in their email address. It'll send an invite. They can come in and work with me in the platform. But I don't have to do that out of the gate. I could just simply, for example, if I turn on my sales view here, I can do sales forecasting by quarter across all my partners across the world. And before I even invite Big Green Surgical in, I could start my sales forecasting here as well. Okay. When you're ready to invite them, again, it's as simple as invite that partner. If I do that and I'm a subscriber of myCaribou, Big Green Surgical can come in as my partner for free and collaborate with me. The key thing to keep in mind here is that if they come into the platform, they're not going to see all my other relationships. They are simply going to see this one partnership of Australia, in Australia, between myself and Big Green Surgical. Okay. All right, so let's look at some of the things we can do with this at this point. So I mentioned sales forecasting. That's a critical piece. We need to get on the same page in terms of expectations. Scott talked about that a few minutes ago. So we can put in targets, we can agree on those targets, and we can track actuals to that with some visibility in the market. But there are some other great tools we can use here. So let's look at an example of one where I'm actually collaborating. So in this case, in the UK, I've got a distributor called XYZ Distributors. I have invited Brad, my partner there, to collaborate with me. And I've got my team internally all collaborating with Brad as well. So we all have access to this particular partnership, okay? Now, what can we do here? Well, we can have discussions. So we can have discussions back and forth between Brad and our team. We could share files. So if you look at the files here, I've got business plans, I've got discussions, I've got product support information, sell sheets, and I can add and files that we can share back and forth between myself and the partner. There's a lot more we can do in here. If I drill in, I'll just show you. We can do things like establish key dates together. Maybe we want to do a quarterly business review. Perhaps we want to establish a business plan together that involves some key objectives that we agree on and track to in that market. That's all available to me and my partner through the platform. And you can pick and choose how detailed you want to get with each partner. Now, we'll point out that if you're a distributor, your supplier relationships can all be managed here as well. So this is not just for manufacturers, it is for distributors as well. Now, one of the great features of my partners is it is a top-down view of the world, of in this case, my world, my distribution globally. And there are times when I want to do something with multiple partners at the same time. So for example, let's say we have a new product fact sheet we want to send out. I could choose all my partners to send it to, or some subset of my partners. Okay, and I could share a file. So I would simply put the file here, and it would then share that file to all my distributors. So product fact sheets, recall notices, whatever it might be, we can include in there. Another example would be messaging. So for example, let's say I'm going to Medtech, which is coming up in a couple of weeks. I could say, I'm going to put a notice out here to all of my partners and say to them something along the lines of this. We are going to be at Medtech in November. If you're going to be there, we would love to meet with you. I won't type in the rest of this. And I hit send, and what that does is actually distributes that message to all of my connected partners around the globe. And immediately then we've actually got some dialogue going about that, where, for example, my Argentinian partner might say, hey, yeah, I'm going too, let's find a time to get together, et cetera. So the efficiency of doing that across multiple partners, sharing files, having discussions, sending a file to multiple partners, sending a message to multiple partners. And the key thing to keep in mind, again, is that all of my partners I can choose when to invite them in, and they get to work with me for free in here. So if I invite GC Medical in Brazil to collaborate with me, they get to come in and do that for free. Okay. All right, let me just pause there momentarily. I did want to just point out actually one quick last item here, which is if you are doing this, you then have these really powerful dashboards that allow me to see my global sales forecast across all those markets and all those partners, as well as interact with those partners. So it's a really powerful platform. Again, to discover markets, find and collaborate with partners through a nice top-down view, and invite them in when I'm ready to work with me in the platform. So let me pause there in terms of demoing the product. We have some questions that are queuing up. So I'm just going to switch over to just the view of Scott and I as we look at these questions. If you have any additional questions, please put them in the Q&A panel now, and I will get to those. So Scott, the first question here is, what do you do if the partner is pushing back and isn't putting effort into communication with us? So what I guess a broader question would be, if you're struggling with communication with that partner, they're pushing back a little bit, what are your thoughts on that from both a manufacturer and a distributor perspective?
Yeah, so as I discussed, it's communication, the pitfall of not addressing a communication process on the front end. In this case, it may sound like it's somewhere down the road and communication is faltering or failing. I think that if you can somehow get that partner on board for a regular dialogue, whether it's 10 minutes a week, 5 minutes a day, whatever it is, there must be, probably a situation where, you may not be as attractive to that partner as you were at one time, and you need to get it back on the rails. So I think that's what I would do is if you can meet them face to face, great. If they're somewhere else in the world that requires a trip and you can do it, get in front of them, but try to get on a regular schedule of dialogue, however that is.
Perfect. A question that came in through the Q&A panel here is, and I'll try to paraphrase a little bit, but we're working with a big healthcare provider who has committed a bit too much inventory. It looks like it's a PPE manufacturer, and it's expiring soon. They've asked us to help them move it. How would you recommend finding a distributor, in particular a trusted distributor?
Yeah. So Craig, you have already demonstrated how you can send out how you can filter through and find partners in various places, and opportunity posting, that feature on myCaribou, works very effectively that way. And in an opportunity post, you can be very specific as to what you're looking for in the way of a partner. So I think you said something about, finding partners, but good, effective partners. So there's a sense of urgency, yeah, because of the expiry dates. There's an opportunity because there's excess inventory. They want to find those partners. But Craig, I guess maybe I'll throw that to you and say, just describe exactly how they would do an opportunity post to narrow that down to find in certain regions of the world some, a short list of potential partners.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly is a use case for opportunity posts. I just touched on it briefly, but yeah, and in fact, in your free trial period, you can even you can try a posted opportunity. It is an interesting use case because I'm assuming you're looking for distributors in a particular market, probably. So that is what these opportunity posts are built for. It specifically would say, we have an opportunity, we've got inventory, here's what it is. I saw one recently where they even, in their opportunity, they provided pricing. So that because this was a let's move some inventory opportunity, they actually provided specific pricing for the market, so that there wasn't any guesswork up front about what's my cost going to be. So that was very powerful. And then certainly I think everything Scott said earlier about, even then once you find a potential distributor or distributors, you still need to do that due diligence. All the things that Scott talked about earlier. Ask the right questions, make sure that they have, actual relationships into where this case PPE, where it needs to be sold into. But we can certainly help you with that as well if you do an opportunity post. So reach out to us if you want some help with that, and we're happy to do so. There was a question in here that was a product question about market data. So let me just answer this one. What are the sources of your market data, and how recent up to date are they? So we cover about 80,000 data points in 105 countries. The data is predominantly sourced from publicly available information. It varies by country. So in a country like Brazil, for example, you might have a set of data sources. In a country like Canada, you have a different set of sources. There are some global sources like the United Nations, World Health Organization, et cetera, where we gather that data and consolidate it, curate it, and provide it through the interface. In terms of the recency, again, it kind of depends on the data. Some data is only updated every few years because that's when the sources are updated. Generally, those global sources are every year, every 6 months, sometimes they're every 2 years, and we go back and refresh the data as regularly as possible. In other cases, in some of the larger markets, the data actually comes out a little bit more regularly, and we can do more regular updates. It might be quarterly, it might be every 6 months. All of our data in there is actually sourced and cited, so you can see how recent it is. You could also go explore that data further through that as well. I'm just looking through some questions here. Okay, so here's one about, so Scott, this one's for you. First, it was great feedback about the value of this webinar, and this person has attended several webinars and appreciates the content you provided today. How do you recommend dealing with legacy partners who were very helpful in the beginning of your launch? This is right up your alley, Scott. Helpful in the beginning of your launch 10 plus years ago, when the agreements were initially very loose, who continue to be a supporter and add value, but now sell very little.
Yeah. I guess that's one where I'd probably have a lot more questions to ask as to, why they're still adding value but selling little and that. But essentially what I'm hearing is they were great at one time and perhaps not as valuable or not as big a part of the picture. So when I say a third, I suppose these guys are in that middle group that need work. So you're either going to be able to elevate them, or you're going to have to let them go. And I think also after 10 years, your own model may have changed. Do they fit your current model, or are they operating based on legacy, legacy activities and habits versus moving them forward with your company? I think I'll just leave it at that. How can you move them forward to being the partner you need them to be today? I'll leave it at that.
Just a couple comments for me on that. So first, if you have some follow on to that, feel free to throw it in the chat, and even if we don't get to it, we will respond afterwards. Happy to connect you to. The other thing I would just say is I've managed business development teams for 25 plus years, and that whole notion of setting specific goals by quarter and holding each other accountable to those goals could help to bring that back on track. I even noticed that with direct sales reps, that it's just so important to have those quarterly targets, whether they are business objective related. We have to do these things, get in front of this many hospitals, this many doctors, this many clinics, et cetera, or more specific, like we think we can sell X amount of these products this quarter. When I showed you the myCaribou platform, there is that really nice top-down sales forecasting tool. That was the reason for that, as well as the business objectives behind that as well. So that's one thing I would add as well, is sit down, discuss those targets, get back on the same page, agree to them, and move forward together. Now, I would also say that that's also potentially a scenario where you're going to need to find a new partner. If that continues, obviously, you may need to be looking for new partners. There's a question here about transparency, Scott, from distributors. So I'll just read it out. How much transparency would you expect from the distributors? Is it realistic to expect them to report all opportunities or even leads? And then what else would you expect? This is a great question.
Yeah, it sure is. And it's applicable to every situation. I don't expect. I think you can't expect a lot of transparency from distributors for the obvious reason that they want to protect their customer base and protect the vultures of the manufacturing world from taking the business direct someday. Yeah, it's just a cultural thing. But I'll add this. There's a distributor here in this distribution company in Canada here that I admire, that that provides an awful lot of transparency to their manufacturing partners, and they have validated that that's the reason why they have great relationships with their manufacturing partners, is because they are very transparent. So how do you move these companies? I guess it's one step at a time, and I've had to do it. I go, let's be transparent, but we won't give names and phone numbers. We won't give maybe specifics. If it's acute care, we maybe won't give the specific hospital. But let's be transparent on the leads and the opportunities and the forecasting, maybe down to the state level, the province level, or wherever you are, or to the rep level, without revealing what you think is sensitive to your organization. So what else would I expect as a manufacturer? I think that you can try to address this, as I was saying earlier, in the contracts and in KPIs, and utilizing, well, the myCaribou have tools to establish performance indicators. So maybe you don't need that level of detail, but there's other information, other data, other objectives that you can be aligned on with them, and managing through in a process that will help you grow your business. And then, the closer you get to that distributor, hopefully the more transparent they're comfortable being with you. I'll leave it at that.
Great, Scott, thanks. Just a couple quick ones here, and then I'm going to have to wrap up in a few minutes time, but there was a comment about Medtech. So somebody mentioned that I'm meeting with them at Medtech. I do want to throw it out there. We are going to be at Medtech. There is a meeting link. I don't know if Angela, if you can pull it up quickly, we could put it in the chat. But if you'd like to meet, if you're going to Medtech and you'd like to meet while there, I can throw my meeting link into the chat. You can book some time and we can sit down and chat. I'd love to meet you personally. I know some of you on the call today, we already have time booked, and that's awesome. So just one thing I just add maybe on that last question about distributors as well is one of the things I've seen is agreeing on. So if I just share my screen momentarily here again, if you can, let's just talk specifics here to an example of, let's say this is the distributor right here in the UK, XYZ distributors, and we have forecast 305. We're tracking at 85,000 right now. Don't read too much into the quarter. This is just sample data. One of the things I've seen that works really nicely is to validate that pipeline is attaching a forecast here. Okay, it could be a spreadsheet. Maybe it came from their CRM system, and they just anonymize the specific end users, the hospitals, the clinics, et cetera. But at least then you start to get some validation of, do we really have the pipeline that's going to fill this gap? And it could just be anonymized that way. I'm just going to take a quick peek here. I think we're running out of time. We are. So let me just share the last thing, which is an upcoming webinar that I think many of you might be very interested in. So hopefully you can see that on the screen now. So we have a GCC countries or Gulf markets webinar coming up. James Hardy is presenting that from Sonolo. Years of experience working, living in those markets. So I know we talked a little bit today, but if you're looking at Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, or Oman, he is going to talk about successful strategies to enter those markets. That's coming up November 10th, so it's just a week before Medtech if you happen to be going to that. And I believe he's also going to be at Medtech if you wanted to meet with him there as well. So on that note, I think we covered most of the questions. And if not, we will get to those afterwards and make sure that we follow up on those. I'm just trying to look at several screens here at the same time and cover off all your questions. All right, so on that note, let's wrap up. We will send you a copy of the PowerPoint, a recording to the webinar. I believe we will also send you a link to my meeting calendar if you want to meet while at Medtech. And Scott, I really want to thank you for your time today. Had some great feedback in the chat and in the Q&A there, but really enjoying the content today.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And we'll also try to make sure everybody gets a copy of that afterwards as well. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for joining, and appreciate your time, and have a great rest of the day. Thanks, everyone.